Well, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Shenggen Fan, chair professor at the China Agriculture University. In the meantime, I'm also a board member of the so-called Integrated Partnership Board of CGIR, the Global Agriculture Research Organization. So today we're going to talk about a key word called nutrition. So nutrition is not just a buzzword. It has a real meaning. So nutrition is not a waste of money. It's an investment. So investing in nutrition has very high returns. So we have a very powerful panel here today. And Agnes Kalibata, the president of AGRA. But in the meantime, she just won a big award. It's called Justus von Liebig Nutrition Award.
Couldn't see.
And then Catherine Bertini. Yeah, let's give you a round of applause. You deserve it. And Catherine Bertini was the executive director of the World Food Program. So now, well, she has many positions, so I'm not going to explain to you every one of the positions he has had, but she's currently the board member, or board chair, sorry, of the Global Crop Trust. If I don't say that, I think our friend from Global Crop Trust will not be very happy. Mm-hmm. And the Lawrence Haddad, and is the executive director of the GAIN, the sort of Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. By the way, both Catherine Bertini and Lawrence Haddad are the World Food Prize laureates. So I will go through one by one to challenge them a bit. And first, I will ask you to give us maybe a 3 to 4 minute statement. So Agnes, you have been the president of AGRA. Obviously, AGRA's main sort of clients are smallholders. Make sure that smallholders produce enough food for their family. But in the meantime, the smallholders also have the obligation, responsibility to produce nutritious and healthy foods for everybody in Africa. So tell us, so how AGRA has really helped smallholders to transform their food production to improve nutrition for themselves and for the whole Africa.
No, thank you, and very good, and very happy to be here with this panel. I think the most critical part of nutrition is the fact that nutrition is a symptom of so many other things. In Africa, particularly nutrition, lack of nutrition is a symptom of food insecurity. The biggest underpinning is the level of food production that is happening on the continent. And when that's not happening right, it definitely comes across as malnutrition or undernutrition. So because of that, AGRA's work has focused on dealing with the challenge of food security and dealing with the challenge of ensuring that farmers can produce enough, dealing with the challenge of increased labor productivity. Mm-hmm. And we were set up as the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. AGRA actually is about the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. When we were set up, Africa was under this impression that you needed to do a green revolution the way it's being done everywhere else in the world. We needed to have seeds and access to seeds. We needed to have fertilizers, and we needed to have extension and all that it takes to build an ecosystem that delivers food security. So that really has been our preoccupation. We went ahead, we worked very hard to develop varieties of seed that would work in the African ecosystem. When AGRA was launched, Kofi Annan called for a uniquely African green revolution, because it had to be that it is addressing the context of the African continent. So the seeds that were developed then, over now thousands of varieties, building on the work that the CGI has done. AGRA doesn't really do research from the ground, but was supporting NAS back then to ensure that every country had the right varieties. Across the countries we were working in, 18 countries then, 21 different crops, of which in that period over 650 varieties were produced. But here's the thing, it's one thing to have the technologies, it's another thing to take them to farmers. The biggest part of our contribution has been about building an ecosystem that delivers technologies to farmers. And that ecosystem, and recognizing that ecosystem has to be anchored in private sector. And here, when I say private sector, I'm not talking about big businesses. We don't have big businesses. I'm talking about SMEs. SMEs on the African continent move 300 million metric tons of food on the continent every day. But at the same time, they move so much inputs to farmers, they move so much knowledge to farmers, they work with everyone. So we really went in to create an ecosystem that delivers. And in the morning, I was really happy to hear the president of the World Bank say that to get this work done at country level, you really need two things, an ecosystem and scale. So that's what we've been working at. The technology is available. There's so much work that has been done under the CGIAR, but creating an ecosystem that helps deliver those technologies to farmers at scale has been the preoccupation of AGRA. So we are working with now, in our current strategy, we're working with about 28 million farmers. And our commitment is that at least 60% of those farmers accessing those technologies. Today, it becomes even more interesting and more important because we are looking for drought tolerance. We are looking for nutrient dense. We are looking for technologies that are different from the ones of yesterday. So really what AGRA does is really create that ecosystem, but also then follow up with the governments to ensure that we are putting the policy environment in place so that private sector can deliver what it does well, an enabling ecosystem for private sector. So that's really what we've been doing. And we are doing that across now 15 countries. And we are reaching millions of farmers. And I really think Africa's agriculture has grown, even though it is now challenged by climate change.
No, thank you, Agnes. I think the ecosystem here is a key word. Now, Agnes, yeah, the nutrition part, yeah, obviously, by improving ecosystem for smallholders, to take on all the technologies, inputs, working with the private sector, SMEs, and so on. But how can we really make sure that the nutrition is a goal, let's say, of the smallholders' production or the whole food system in Africa's perspective? Yeah.
So I think there are a number of things, but right now what we are focused on is being extremely sensitive to ensuring that of the varieties that are being put out there, that we are actually taking out varieties that are nutrient dense. And again, there's so much that is there from iron fortified beans. Now we are in a partnership with IRI to take zinc fortified rice. There's already a lot that is happening in the biofortified space that can get out there. We are also looking at again, systems. We are now working with the support of the Rockefeller Foundation to get procurement systems to work for nutrition, where school feeding is actually beginning to work for nutrition. Public procurement is working for nutrition, really making sure that we are taking it to farmers. But the third part is we are being very intentional about women. In countries like Burkina Faso, in countries like Mali, where you have a significant part of the population that is falling out of nutrition, either because of conflict or other reasons, we are making sure that when we are helping communities rebuild their lives, they're actually accessing nutrient-dense varieties. We're actually prioritizing women. So we are working with over 100,000 women in Burkina Faso alone. We are working with about 200,000 women in Mali alone. And we are making sure that we have at least an acre per woman, that's what we call it, where the woman, because we saw that in COVID-19, the biggest part of impact to nutrition was where households could not access the right food. Right. Now we are embracing VAX in the sense that we are finding those varieties that are nutrient dense, that can make a difference at household level, are actually available to women. Cowpeas, in West Africa is a very important variety. Sorghums, millets are very important varieties that we are now getting to farmers to ensure that as they rebuild their lives, they are starting with nutrient-dense varieties, but also to ensure that we are starting with women who are the ones that are having to deal with the challenge of malnutrition in their families.
Very good. Yeah, thank you, Agnes. Now, you mentioned about, let's say, a woman, particularly the productive age woman, the maternal and the children's nutrition are very critical. Catherine, you have worked for WFA so many years. I remember one of the top priority is focusing on maternal and children's nutrition. We know that today, well, we have made some progress in reducing hunger, but nevertheless, we still have probably more than 700 million people suffer from hunger. Many suffer from hidden hunger. But here, I think the women and the children are particularly vulnerable. And if we continue this trend, we have no way to achieve 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, particularly the nutrition ones, not just the hunger, hidden hunger and overweight, obesity. All these actions are moving towards the wrong direction. So, Catherine, how can we really focus on maternal and child nutrition, particularly through the school meals, when you have tons of experience working on that during your WFPED tenure?
Well, Shenggen, we are moving in a poor direction. We have had a lot of help, and I want to give credit to IFPRI because the kind of research that IFPRI did under your leadership, that does now and did before, has been very important for that research to be used by implementers to know how important nutrition is and how important the role of women is when we think about adequate nutrition and anti-hunger programs. At the World Food Program, now some time ago, we realized something very basic. Women are the cooks. Women are the people that bring the food home. Women are the people that prepare the food. Women are the people that shop for the food if they can afford it. They are the ones invested in the family's nutritional well-being. So why don't we think more about highlighting their role, if in fact, part of our objective is to improve nutrition? And if we're going to highlight the role of women, then we need to have more women working with women, because in many societies we can't send a strange man to talk with women about what their needs are. So that becomes very important. By the way, I said this once upon a time to Bill Gates when I was working at the Gates Foundation, and he said, "Oh, I don't want to hear about empowerment and all this politically correct stuff." And I said, "No, this is not presented to you because it's politically correct," even though I thought it was. It's because we want to make these programs most effective. And if you want to have the most effective agricultural programs with the most impact on the population, you have to pay attention to who grows the food. You have to pay attention to who prepares the food. You have to pay attention to who brings the food into the household. And when you do that, you come to women, and then you pay attention to women. And a year later, when he was talking on the National Public Radio, he said to the interviewer, "By the way, not very many people know it, but most of the farmers in Africa are women." Aha. Melinda wrote about this in her book, by the way, so I feel like I can tell the story. But here's the thing. If we want to rethink nutrition, then let's rethink nutrition. We have agriculture, and we have health, and we've built industries around both of these, and they make money, and they're important. They're all very important. But isn't the objective of both of them to have populations that are healthy, which means they have adequate nutrition, they have enough food coming into their household, and they know how to prepare it and present it to the family? That's why we're in this business, isn't it? So rather than having a nutrition program buried in the Department of Agriculture or an FAO, or buried at WHO along with several other things, why isn't that the lead? And by the way, we're using health and agriculture to help us bring adequate nutrition to families. And when we think about not only the maternal nutrition, but the role of women, we have to think about babies. IFPRI and the University of Bonn both published papers last year where they studied the children whose families were victims of the food price crisis in 2008 to 2011. And by this time, they had enough data to be able to say many of those children, many more than normal, were stunted and wasted because their families didn't have enough food coming in because they had the shock of the prices of food and the availability of food. So when we have that kind of data, why can't we use it better? When we have the kind of data like from COVID that you mentioned before, when so many people died because they had inadequate nutrition. they had undernutrition or overnutrition, and therefore they had other comorbidities, and they were more susceptible to the disease within the pandemic. Why haven't we done more about the nutrition of our own populations when we know it could mean actually whether they live or die? And then when we even do things right off the presses, Roger Thoreau's got a book he's here talking about. I think there's a book signing this week. And read some of his stories, and one of them is about a young boy who didn't have enough food when he was a little boy, and now he's 20 years old, and he's working, but he's not as productive as he could have been if he had adequate nutrition. So, Shenggen, to me, the answer is, when we rethink nutrition, let's start with nutrition and figure out how agriculture is going to get us there and how health systems are going to get us there.
Well, I call it nutrition-led agriculture, or nutrition-led food systems. Now, Catherine, you have worked on school feeding programs for a long, long time. I had an idea. I want to test you. Can we help the schools to set up school gardens? The high school, middle school can produce their own food. So then the students can learn agriculture, can learn food system, how food is produced. But in the meantime, they have access to healthy, maybe safe foods. I mean, can we do something like this in a school garden? I have seen opportunities in China because nobody wants to do farming. But in the meantime, the children are getting urbanized. They don't know what's going on in food and agriculture. So can that work?
Yes, it can work, and FAO has been working on this for some time in different communities. But now there's a lot of win-wins out there. Well, especially when we think about the laureates from this year, Jeff and Carrie, and we think about the different kinds of seeds that they're reminding us that exist and that they're working to protect. We can look at programs like one in Zambia, where a guy named Francis Wanza said, "I want to bring back my grandfather's crops to my village." So where did he start? At school. He started at the schools where he said, we're going to train the students about what these crops used to be in their great-great-grandfather's time, and we're going to show them how their great-great-grandmother prepared the food, and then we're going to grow it right here at school, and we're going to feed it in school lunch. And then some programs like the Rockefeller Foundation, they're saying, okay, let's be sure, and AGRA and others, let's be sure that that food is fortified and that it's got the right kind of nutrients so that we can be feeding these children healthy food and teaching them how to prepare it as well.
Very good, very good. So Lawrence, when you work on Global Nutrition Report, I know you said, we need to better track, monitor how much investment that went to nutrition. Resources are limited. They have competing uses. I mean, even here, we hear from the ministers, from other high-level officials say, resources are very limited. So how can we really smartly, let's use some sort of strategic approach or methods to make sure that, we can trigger, or maybe we can bring more resources to support nutrition actions to really improve the nutrition. Here we heard that we must do it, but the question is how, particularly resources are very limited.
Thank you, Shenggen. I'm loving the passion from my fellow panelists. Thank you. Nutrition investments for a long time, when I was at IFPRI until 2004, I was the director of the Food Consumption and Nutrition Division. And this was Pear's division, and it was hard to get anyone outside of our division to pay attention to nutrition. So it's kind of music to my ears that this is now happening. I want to take a slightly different tack, if I may, Shenggen. During that period, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we came up with those estimates. You've heard them, the benefit-cost ratios of investing in nutrition scaling programs are 16-1, the kind of things Catherine was talking about, what happens 10, 15, 20 years later. The World Bank, incidentally, has just released a new update of that number. I think it's now 25-1, that benefit-cost ratio. So that's very strategic if you want to, talking to the Minister of Agriculture in Rwanda, the state minister in Rwanda last year, and Rwanda has a very ambitious economic growth program. And I said to the state minister, with all due respect, you're never going to get there because 28% of your kids are stunted. If you really want those kids in 18 years to be productive in the labor force, it's not going to happen. So that's one set of strategic investments, the long run. But I think we're in a very different space at the moment, and we will be in the next 5 years. And I wanted to just spend 2 minutes on that. So we're in a period now where resources are scarce. You're right, we're both economists. Resources, scarce resources have alternative uses. And we're in a scarce resource moment because of high interest rates, because of high inflation, because of other claims on development cooperation funds relating to Ukraine, the Middle East. Governments are still recovering from the high spending they did in COVID. So we're in a very resource-constrained environment right now. And I'm quite fixated on the Nutrition for Growth Summit, which is coming up in March. It's a pledging summit every 4 or 5 years, linked to the Olympics. The next one will be in the US in 3 or 4 years' time. And at these kind of pledging summits, and that's where the Global Nutrition Report was born in 2013, the commitments are always, this country put in another 500 million for nutrition, this donor put in another billion for nutrition. That's not going to happen this time around because there's just no money around. So that's bad, but in a way there's a silver lining there, and the silver lining is we have to be more creative about where resources are coming from. There are a lot of resources out there, just not many of them are pointing to nutrition, as Catherine notes and as Agnes notes in the agriculture and food system. So there are 3 areas where I think we as people who care about nutrition can do a lot more, and it's really in the interests of the people we're trying to lobby. So I think, first of all, climate. There's quite a bit of climate resources out there. And I think the president of the World Bank said it this morning, 1/3 of the emissions that are being emitted come from the food system. And yet the climate activists, the climate champions, are looking at transport and energy. They're not really looking at food. And they should, because if they did look at food, they'd find so many opportunities, not only to reduce emissions, but to also build adaptation and resilience. Food loss and food waste is one obvious example. Most food that is lost post-farm gate is highly perishable. Highly perishable food tends to have more micronutrients in it. So here's an investment in reducing food loss to prevent the release of zombie emissions, emissions that don't benefit human consumption, and it's a way of preserving nutritious food so it can actually make it to the market. That's a really great example of something that is in the climate champions' interest and also in the nutrition champions. Second area is DFIs, IFIs, development banks. When money is tight, donors tend to give money to those kind of organizations. The transaction costs are low, it's kind of a safe pair of hands, it's easy to do that. But by and large, there are exceptions, the African Development Bank is one of them, those organizations are pretty awful when it comes to nutrition. They're pretty weak, I would say. They say they're going to do a lot of stuff, but if you look at the numbers and if you look at what they spend and you look at the impact of what they do, it's pretty feeble. Now, why is it in their interest to do more on nutrition? I think it's in their interest because they're getting more and more pressure from the funders and the stakeholders to demonstrate an impact at a human level. It's not enough to say we got this rate of interest, rate of return on our investment. That's not enough. You're a development bank. You're a development institution. You're a development finance institution. You've got to show what the impact is on development. So I think they are getting under pressure, and we in Nutrition Champions can make a big impact there. And the third area is the private sector. Again, the president of the World Bank said it right this morning. He said, too often our approaches to the private sector are, what's the role of the private sector? There is no role for them. There's no role that we will assign. Their role is to make money. and to generate a good return, staying within the law, hopefully within moral and ethical bounds. Their job is to make money for the stakeholders and the shareholders. But we are being really not very clever about selective investments in the public sector to leverage these massive resource flows. We just opened up a blended finance fund for SMEs in Africa that are producing nutritious foods. The leverage is 15 million to 100 million. We've gotten 15 million of public sector funding that will now leverage another 100 million of private sector funding. That's a small example of a smart way, and USAID were incredibly helpful to get that going. That's a small way of leveraging, using limited public sector funding to leverage much bigger private sector resources. We're not being smart enough in leveraging the scarce resources to get really big flows of private sector and other resources into the nutrition space.
Yeah, the key word is leverage. So Lawrence, I know you supported biofortification, or basically add micronutrients through breeding, or fortification. You add micronutrients during processing. Now, under the current situation, you mentioned about the climate funds. Under the climate change, agri-food system, is a victim, but it also a contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, particularly methane. This morning, the World Bank president mentioned about methane. Now, if, let's say, we all move towards more plant-based diets, but in the meantime, we wanted to ensure our micronutrients intake in our food, can biofortification, they have new life? How can we really help to lighten that little bit?
Well, I learned from my colleague and mentor, Howard Bouis, who led Harvest Plus for so many years, and basically was along with his other three World Food Laureates, were the pioneers of biofortification. I would just say there are 4 ways to get more micronutrients. Micronutrients are the vitamins and minerals that are so important for immune system development, brain development, muscle, bone mass, everything pretty much. There's 4 ways to get them. One is through fortification, which is simply adding them. I'm making it sound simple, it's very complicated, but simply adding them to foods that low-income consumers are already consuming, grains, edible oil. Second way is biofortification, where using conventional breeding techniques, we just select crops that are high in iron or vitamin A or zinc. So high zinc rice, bred conventionally, for example. The third way is through supplements, and this is very important for pregnant and lactating women, and they can't get the folate they need through the diet. And then the fourth way is really probably the best way and the most sustainable way, and that is a more diverse diet, making vegetables, fruits, pulses, eggs, dairy, fish, these kind of foods more available, more affordable, and more desirable. They're very expensive. 75% of Africa can't afford a healthy diet, and that's extraordinary. Half the world is micronutrient deficient. So fortification can play a role in all of this, and I think it will get a new lease of life in the climate-ravaged world that we are living in and will live in the future. And I think it will have a new lease of life because it's a very low emissions way of getting micronutrients into people's diets. Much more low emissions than animal source foods, which are very important, but have this very important for nutrition and for livelihoods and for a whole range of things, but are very emissions intensive when it comes to supplying micronutrients. I also think biofortified crops and fortification will become more important because we know as CO2 levels go up, that depresses the density of micronutrients in staple crops. So I think you will see a new lease of life for those 2 technologies because they're inexpensive and they're climate smart.
Yeah, that's great. I think sometimes, we think maybe some ideas are very old, but if the new context comes, this old idea may become new idea or renewed idea. I should call it renewed ideas, like fortification, biofortification. By the way, we have a 100% perfectly gender balanced panel. But in the meantime, we're also probably 80% of globally representative panels. You know, I'm from Asia, Africa, North America, and Europe. Probably we just missed a lot.
You did good.
I don't know, a small continent somewhere, probably even 90% of the world population. Anyway, so thank you for the first round. Now, in our room, I see the government officials, the private sector, agribusiness people, researchers like us, like me before. So now I wanted to ask you, each one of you, so what's your invite? How can you really, let's say, convince them to invest in nutrition? That's the private sector, agribusiness, the researchers, CGIAR, government, Ministry of Finance, and so on. So Agnes, do you want to do reverse order or you want to start first?
No, I mean...
Okay, why don't you start first? I mean, Africa, well, just like what Lawrence and Catherine said, I think that today the malnutrition issue in Africa probably is the most serious, probably accounting for more than half of the challenges, problems we face today.
Yeah, okay. Listen, what's the population of Africa today?
Well, the question is, well, we have lots of...
No, population. We are 1.something billion people?
Right now, globally,
Yeah,
almost
Africa.
8 billion.
Africa is about 1.
Yeah, well, no, the Africa is about 2 billion. So the whole world is about probably
very good.
Almost 8
so
billion.
let's look at it this way. Let's start this way. 2 billion people that eat 3 times a day, right? They eat food 3 times a day. You want to make sure that that food is nutritious, right? Lawrence just said that 75% of the people in Africa are not accessing nutrition. Nutritious.
Well, globally, it's about 2.8 billion people who do not have access to healthy nutrition.
Who do not have.
In Africa, yes, majority of them.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of numbers, you asked me to make a pitch for investing in Africa, right? So that's what I'm trying to do here. In terms of numbers, I don't think it gets better than that. If you're looking to invest in nutrition, the numbers are right there. 75% of 2 billion people is a whole lot of people. And how would you do that? We did something really, really creative with World Food Programme in Rwanda, with lots of other partners. Private sector, public institutions like ours, World Food Programme, AGRA, and build this partnership with a company to feed. In fact, it was based on Roger Throw's book, 1,000 Days, to feed children in the first 1,000 days. This started out as a public-private partnership where private sector said that it was going to be very difficult to make money. Okay? So in the first 5 years, it's difficult to make money. You're building a case, you're building businesses and all that. So all of us pitched in. My government, Rwanda government, used its nutrition money to purchase food for the 1,000 days. World Food Programme made a commitment to purchase food from this company to supply neighboring countries because we were importing this food from France, and the food basically is mostly maize and soybean that can be grown in Africa. So here is the thing. This company today is breaking even. It's running as a good business. It's purchasing maize and soybean, not just in Rwanda, all the way to Zambia. Like, it's providing a market. Just by dealing in nutrition, it's providing a market for countries all the way to Zambia, from Rwanda to Zambia and beyond. So I just want to say that even with that type of company, we are not doing enough in Rwanda. There's still a market to tap into in Rwanda. But that type of company is a model of what is possible when we invest in the right things. It's not going to be possible. It wouldn't have been possible for DSM to do it as a business on their own because they would have lost lots of money. They don't understand the environment. They needed the government to be committed. We can mobilize African governments to be committed. You heard the minister from Sierra Leone saying that. We can work with World Food Programme to be committed. We are working with GAIN. We are beginning to look at which countries do we drive fortification faster? Do we drive nutrition education faster? So we've figured out how to design partnerships that can deliver value for private sector. So there's an opportunity. The population is there. The food is there. We need the investments.
Very good.
That's what I can
Population
say.
are there, food are there.
Yeah.
I wanted to use the nutrition to link
Yeah.
them. Now, Catherine, now wearing a new hat as the board chair of the Global Crop Trust, I think this year's laureates are really working on protecting biodiversity. And now, protecting biodiversity is not to guarantee the quantity of our food production in the future, right? We preserve all this genetics somewhere. But I think more important is nutrition. All these different so-called opportunity crops. So how, let's say, the Global Crop Trust can continue to really persuade their investors to make sure that nutrition is one of the goals. I think using nutrition probably even more attractive than the total quantity of the food produced. Your take. How can you convince, let's say, investors or the private sector or researchers or the government here?
Well, 2 points. One, as Lawrence said, resources are tough. But what's really important in this whole business of saving seeds is to have regular resources so that there are not blips, because if there's blips, if a seed bank gets flooded, the seeds are ruined. If there's war and it gets destroyed, the seeds are ruined. If there's some other calamity, the seeds are ruined, which is one reason why there needs to be investments through the CG system, through national government systems, through private systems, and through the Svalbard Seed Bank, Seed Vault, to be able to save seeds. And there's a great story about Syrian seeds that were saved before the seed bank in Syria was ruined and moved to Svalbard, and then researchers and farmers from Morocco and Lebanon borrowed some of those seeds, replanted them, and then replaced the seeds again. That's really what it's for, and it's to be able to help support the nutritional well-being over the long term, and let us not lose, as Jeff talked about last night in his lecture, lose the opportunity to have some of the nutrients that we once had, just because there are so many changes, normal changes over time, that we might end up losing the character of things that we had before. But that gets us back to resources and the fact that we need to have regular resources to support those banks, and there's never enough. And Global Crop Diversity Trust needs more resources to be able to invest in those banks. Interesting thing, though, this doesn't happen in most of our programs, is that we have an endowment. So governments and others give to the endowment, and then the money that's invested from the endowment is what is used in order to support those seed banks. So it's a way to keep something going without having to be begging every year, although we're still begging every year because we need more than what we have, but at least we make commitments for the basis. But to the question you asked, Agnes, I want to go back to if I were a finance minister of a country, I would want my country to be healthy, but I would define health as the financial well-being of the country, right? I want my country to be strong, and I want there to be a lot of people working, and I want there to be a lot of production and a lot of investment in my country. And I want the country to be able to grow, and in order to do that, what do I need? I need a healthy workforce, which means I need to start from the very basics of children, of pregnant mothers and of children being born and having nutritious food then so that they can become strong working adults. I need to invest in girls' education. According to the World Bank, the countries that have more girls educated through secondary and tertiary school actually have a higher GDP. Their GDPs grow when women are educated. I need to invest in basic human needs, starting with human health, in order to get where I want to get, to have a strong, vibrant country.
That's right. Yep. Well, nutrition investment for the whole economy. Now, Lawrence, you are one of the smartest persons, in food policy, but also in pushing nutrition, to be integrated into the food systems. Now, can you be even smarter to convince the people here? Hey,
I've been trying, I'm not very successful. Look, even if these four people were the most powerful, charismatic people on the planet, and we're not far off, let's face it. If we were the four most powerful and charismatic people on the planet, you out there shouldn't invest in nutrition to please us. Do it for yourself. If you're if health is the thing that drives you, and I'm really just building on Catherine's point, malnutrition is making your health, it's wrecking your health systems. It's making them so expensive. Diabetes, hypertension, obesity, every country, anemia, it's causing your health systems to collapse. If you're into educational outcomes, if that's your main priority, keeping girls in school through offering healthy meals, making kids learn when they're very young. This is what's going to boost your education outcomes. If you're interested in labor productivity, you should be feeding your workforce healthy nutrition. If you care about climate action and you're looking for new avenues for climate action, invest in foods that are nourishing but are perishable. There are if you're interested in social protection programs and poverty reduction, make sure your social protection programs are not only reducing poverty today, they're reducing poverty for generations to come by having a nutrition angle to them. If you're interested in local production and production diversity, focus on dietary diversity, because dietary diversity will generate and give you a demand for production diversity. You can't make one part of the food system diverse without making the other parts diverse. So that's my message, that's my pitch to everyone here. But my other pitch is to the people who are nutrition champions already. Don't be purists. Don't be the curators of something that's small and perfect, but irrelevant. Make sure you grow nutrition. Make sure you reach out to people who are potential allies, potential investors, even though they don't know it yet. We have to be in the realm of growing nutrition as imperfectly as that is, without the right evidence. Just do it, because that's the only way you're going to scale the impact of nutrition investments. And you all saw the cover of The Economist magazine a couple of months ago. How to make the world smarter, invest in nutrition.
Yeah. Well, while we are sitting here, there are 733 million people who suffer from hunger. The latest, I think the Lancet article says that 70% of the world population is experiencing hidden hunger. Lack of iodine, lack of vitamin A, iron, zinc, and so on. In the meantime, 148 million children are stunted, well, under 5. And so if this trend continues, there's no way to achieve zero hunger, zero malnutrition by 2030. So we got to act together. I really hope our panelists have convinced you, they made it on their pitches, convince you to not just your investment, to really leverage all the actions for improving nutrition. So as I said, let me once again re-emphasize, so nutrition is a maker, it's not a marker. It is an investment to improve the human health, but also to really generate high economic growth, more jobs, more opportunities. So I think nutrition is also an opportunity. So it's not just a cost. So with that, I want to thank 3 panelists and your great pitches. I hope you can all join me to thank them and for their great contribution to the dialogue.